rocking Jerusalem, church getting higher, ringing the bells, rocking Jerusalem, church getting higher, ringing the bells. Oh Mary, oh Martha, oh Mary, ring them bells. Oh Mary, oh Martha, oh Mary, ring them bells. Jerusalem, 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 ringing the bells. Jerusalem, 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 ringing the bells. Rocking Jerusalem, ringing the bells, rocking Jerusalem. Ringing the bells. Oh Mary, oh Martha, oh Mary, ring them bells. Oh Mary, oh Martha, oh Mary, ring them bells. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, rocking Jerusalem, Jerusalem, ringing the bells. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, rocking Jerusalem, Jerusalem, ringing the
I believe that children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. These are the opening lyrics to The Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston. And the sentiments of the song are beautiful, but do we really believe that? As a public school teacher in the K-12 school systems, and now as the director of the Fisk Jubilee Singers, I hear a lot of things about youth and young adults. They're lazy, they're addicted to technology, they don't have soft skills, they have nasty attitudes, they're selfish, they only care about themselves and their comfort and their success. But young people have shaped our world. In fact, youth and young people have been a part of some of the most significant cultural transformations in our country. We must recognize their power for the present and the future, but we can't forget what they've done for us in the past. We may remember the great moments, like the work of art, the writing, or the protests, but who are these people? The Fisk Jubilee Singers are a Grammy Award-winning, world-renowned ensemble. They have performed at some of the greatest performance venues such as the Grand Ole Opry and Carnegie Hall. But what people may not realize is that this professional performing ensemble is also a college class. These are students who are receiving a grade. They've passed today. You may also not know that they are responsible for pioneering a uniquely American musical art form. The Negro spiritual, or the African American spiritual, is one of the most important and largest sections of American folk music. Having its origins in the gatherings of enslaved Africans in the 1800s, many of the tunes and the composers are anonymous, as Negro spiritual was passed down through oral tradition. The Negro spiritual has elements of art song, so it takes a pre-existing text and it is set to music. And what makes the Negro spiritual so very special is it takes the organization and the structure of the Western classical canon, and it is combined with the pathos and the story and the hope of the experience of blacks during that time. You cannot have a discussion about the birth or the origins of the Negro spiritual without mentioning the Fisk Jubilee Singers. While they're not responsible for creating the genre, they are responsible for popularizing it and putting it on a world stage. And because of them, we are able to enjoy many of the American popular musics today. In fact, the Jubilee Singers essentially were America's first pop sensation that went on a world tour. So, who are the Fisk Jubilee Singers? In 1866, the Fisk Free Colored School opened its doors here in Nashville, Tennessee. and it was incorporated as a university in 1867. Like many other HBCUs, they fell under dire financial straits. On the brink of total financial collapse, on October 6, 1871, Mr. George L. White, who was a treasurer and the music professor at the time, took the university's last $40 and gathered 9 students to go out and raise money for the school. Initially, they were singing popular music at the time, but they were met with much failure. It wasn't until they realized the audience's enthusiasm when they performed the deeply personal stories in song, the Negro Spiritual. So in 1873, now with 11 members, the Jubilee Singers went on a tour in Europe, a collection of tours, and they went to Britain, Holland, Germany, Switzerland, and gained international acclaim. However, through their efforts, they were able to gather about $150,000 for their school, about $3 million currently. And with that, they were able to finance their way back to Fisk University, settle the debts of the university, and expand the campus through building projects such as Jubilee Hall, which is the first permanent structure for the education of African Americans after the close of the Civil War. But today, our time is not about the compelling history of Fisk University. The Fisk Jubilee Singers as people, just like the students that were behind me, the original Fisk Jubilee Singers were students. They were tasked with saving their school. The oldest member was 25 years old, and the youngest member was Miss Minnie Tate at the young age of 14. Now ask yourself, would you give that much responsibility to a 14-year-old? And the trend would continue through history. When you see many of the pictures of demonstrations and protests during the Civil Rights Movement, those are young people, high schoolers. My father was one of them. In 1960, 4 teenagers went into the Woolworth Dining Counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, and started the sit-ins. The Little Rock Nine desegregated the all-white Little Rock Central High School just 3 years after the seminal Brown versus Board of Education ruling. Hezekiah Watkins was 13 years old when he was arrested for the accusation of being a freedom rider. He was sent to Parchman Penitentiary in Mississippi and put on death row. And for 5 days, he waited there. Upon his release, he would join the movement and was arrested 100 times more in his life. The late John Lewis was 21 years old when he was arrested for being a freedom rider. Incidentally, Alexander Hamilton was 21 years old when he affixed his signature to the Declaration of Independence. Can you imagine being 13 years old and being on death row in jail? Can you imagine being 21 years old and being burdened with building the foundations of this country? Now, of course, we celebrate the resilience and the tenacity of the sacrifice of these young people. But when young people do not meet our expectations, they are met with so much contempt. And because of this, we place a deficit on them. As a public school teacher in a Title I school district, everything that I would hear about my students, well, not everything, most things I would hear about my students was negative. They're violent, they don't come to class, they skip school, they are all on weed and smoke drugs, the parents aren't involved, they have low scores, the communities are dilapidated. And some of these things may be true. However, what I loved most about teaching was being a part of the journey of those students seeing themselves differently than the world did. In many ways, the world had counted them out. But in my classroom, they were leaders, they were innovators, they were creatives. In every concert that we had, they would display that. Now, I'm not saying that my music classroom is going to change the course of history, but I am saying that when I gave my students the opportunity to be great, they were great. So how can we expect youth and young people to interact with new scenarios with unproductive methods and unproductive attitudes? I believe progress happens when the institutional knowledge and infrastructure of the old is combined with the newness, innovation, and creativity of the young. because nothing happens in isolation, but only in concert, meaning nothing happens as a singularity, but by working together. As a teacher, I live by the principle of Sankofa, which is go back and get it. It is a term from the Akan tribe in Ghana. And the literal translation says, it is not taboo to fetch that which is at risk of being left behind. And so the Akan believe that it is wisdom to learn from the past to bring forth a stronger future. Going back and get it. And when we, as the older generation, when our young people don't live up to our expectations, our rigid expectations, they're left behind. I teach because that is the way that I go back and get them. And I'm obligated to do that because someone came back and got me. I also think about these discussions around change and progress. I think we look at them as like an equation, like a linear model where we have a constant, there are variables that can be manipulated, and then we get a intended outcome. But in the spirit of Dr. Robin G. Kelley, I think we should look at progress and change as a constant pursuit or even as a constant struggle. And so the outcome is not going to be a codified, quantified outcome, but it's going to be a little more flexible. Because, you know, change and progress is not easy, it's hard, and it's messy. But the mess of change and progress does not indicate failure. When you're working with youth or working for youth and for progress, you may never see the return on that investment, but know that it is an investment. Because when you're doing that work, you're either planting a seed, watering a seed, or witnessing a harvest. In closing, in the words of Franklin D. Roosevelt, we cannot always prepare our future for our youth, but we can prepare our youth for the future. And now the future of the Fisk Jubilee Singers, I present to you. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you. Oh, you brought me and you brought me from a mighty long way. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. Oh, you brought me from a mighty long way. You've been my mother, you've been my sister, my brother. Thank you, Lord, from a mighty long way. Yes, you've been my all, my all and all. I thank you, Jesus. You've been my father. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. You know you brought me, yes, you brought me from a mighty long way. Been my keeper, day by day. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. You brought me, yes, you brought me from a mighty long way. Lord, I said you've been my mother. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. You know you brought me, yes, you brought me from a mighty long way. Been my keeper, day by day. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. You brought me, yes, you brought me from a mighty long way. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. Brought me from a mighty long way. You brought me from a mighty long way. you brought me from a mighty. Thank you, Jesus, I thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus, I thank you, Lord.